Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are here, and we are once again recording an episode of the Ferret Cafe Podcast live every other Thursday around 8 p.m. So if you are listening to the VOD of this episode, just know that you can tune in live and join the conversation in the Twitch chat on my Twitch channel.
Fuck you, idiot!
Yes, you also get to control the sound commands that happen during the show, because it is partially ran by the audience as well. If you don't know, the Ferret Cafe is pretty much just a podcast about anything and all that. Don't know what else to say other than if you haven't listened to the first 8 episodes, then I don't know why you're starting with this one, because they're all pretty good if you ask me. If you want to check out Jeopardy, that happened last episode. Greedy Waffles took the crown against Callus in a blazing victory. If you want to check that out, that's available in both video. I mean, all these episodes are in video and podcast forms, but that episode was very, very much visual, so I would recommend doing the YouTube version. And don't forget to drop a like if you're listening to this on YouTube or watching on YouTube.
Hello there.
Don't forget to drop a like. It does help the channel, also helps my mental health. We got some topics lined up today. I'm not going to start with the DQ Blizzard thing. I think that's a topic that a lot of people are kind of interested in, so I do want to wait until more people drop in, because it is a pretty interesting story. But we're going to start off with something that happened to me this past week. Pretty bizarre incident, really. And this is probably not going to be in the title or anything like that, because it's like, whatever, who really cares? I mean, what am I mean, I don't know how I would put this in the title and people would click on it, right? Like, my most embarrassing story ever. Like, yeah, that's catchy. That people will click on that. Random road rage guy. I don't know. I don't know. But let's get started. People will filter in here, and we'll get to the Dairy Queen story in a little bit. So I do live in an area that doesn't really have a lot of aggressive drivers, I guess you would say. I mean, there's a lot of people who kind of, they follow the rules of the road. Me personally, I do like to go about 5 or 6 or 7 over, usually. And obviously there are the people who are like kind of crazy. Like this morning, I was going through a school zone and everyone was driving like 20 to 25 miles per hour, as you're supposed to. And there's a person like weaving in and out of traffic like crazy, like just trying to get around. And I'm like, dude, it's a school zone. Like, what are you, crazy? And of course, oh, thank you. And of course the there we go. Check. All right. Thank you for letting me know. And of course, there's no police, no police car around this time. Usually there is one in the morning by the school zone that I live near, but this morning, of course, not. And of course, this person took full advantage, and I was just weaving in and out of traffic, right? Pretty crazy. I got pulled over once in a school zone. I kind of got screwed a little bit because the lights for the school zone like started flashing as I was driving through it. So I'm not gonna say that like I didn't do something illegal, but I will say that I did kind of get screwed there a little bit. But the officer didn't give me a ticket, luckily. He just said, hey, slow down in the school zone. I'm like, okay, thank you, But, so anyway, this past week, like I said, I mean, not a lot of, I like, in my area, I don't think, like, sure, maybe on the freeway there's some road rage here and there, but you don't really get like this aggressive of road rage around that I'm about to talk about. And I know this is a lot of build up for something that's probably not even going to be that interesting in the end, but I just felt like I really needed to talk about this because it was so absurd, So driving down the road, it's a 25 mile per hour zone. It's a part of the road that has a lot of like stoplights. It's one of those like kind of more It's right around the freeway. Greedy Waffles knows where it's at. It's right around the freeway. There's a strip of road. It's got a Sheetz. It's got a McDonald's. It's got tons of traffic lights. It usually takes about 10 minutes to get down this single stretch of road, especially in the morning. And there was this guy in like a white car, a few cars in front of me, that was going like exactly 25. And there's a point where you get to a bridge that goes over the freeway where it turns into 35 miles per hour. So, the bridge is kind of like the stopgap where it's like, okay, this is where the 25 ends and 35 begins, right? So, the first car that's behind him, there's two cars in front of me. So the first car behind him moves over, goes around, no problem, right? And I get a bit of, I can't see, I can't see the car yet. There's an SUV in front of me. So we're going over the bridge, and right as we're getting to it, the car in front of me, he doesn't turn on his turn signal or anything like that. He just swerves around, speeds up, and then swerves back into place in front of the white car, and then the traffic light on the other side of the bridge turns yellow and then red, so he's kind of stuck there, right? And I feel like doing the same thing. I'm not as aggressive, so what I do is I turn on my blinker and move around. I'm not like speeding up so much that I'm gonna like burn rubber, but I start to go a bit more like 30-ish over the bridge. I know it's a red light, so I slow down a little bit, and I hear I hear this like banging noise beside me, and it makes me jolt. I'm like, I get jump scared a little bit. I'm like, what the hell? Did I hit something? Did something hit me? What the hell's going on? And I look over real quickly, and this dude with like a mohawk. It's like one of those short mohawks, kind of like what I have now, but like way smaller. Like it's not as wide as my head. But he kind of looked like Flea. If you know Flea from the Red Hot Chili Peppers, kind of like that, except the mohawk was a little bit more fat, I guess you would say, and short hair. So and this guy is like leaning out of his car window. He's driving the car and he's leaning out of his car window, and he is like slamming his fist on the side of his car door. And this bizarre sight was shocking, to say the least. And we come to a stop at the traffic light, and he starts yelling at the guy in front of him who swerved around. I forget exactly what he said, but of course the guy in front of me, he didn't even have his window open. He was just kind of sitting there, and all of a sudden this crazy guy is banging on the side of his car with his fists. And yes, the entire door is dented, so he obviously does it a lot. So the entire side, the driver's side door was essentially dented in, and where he was hitting the door was like the most impacted spot. So this guy is screaming out his window and banging with his fist on the side of his car, and he's yelling out like, what's wrong with you, asshole? Swerving around me, whatever. Speeding up and swerving around me, whatever. And the guy in front of me just kind of like, he opens his window, and the other guy's like still screaming, and he doesn't stick his hand out of his window. He just yells back like, "You're the guy yelling." I don't know why. I just felt like that was like a missed opportunity there a little bit. But then again, you don't want to elevate the situation. You just kind of want to get out of it at that point, because someone crazy is behind you with a car, and yes, cars can be used as weapons. So in front of the stoplight that we're at, there's another stoplight for another intersection. It's one of those roads that it's stop and go over and over and over again. So the guy who's in the SUV in front of the white car and kind of to the right of me, as soon as the light turns green, he steps on it and he gets out of there. And he goes past the other light as it's turning red. So now I'm stuck at the next stop light, with the guy who was banging on his car door, and I'm okay. So I'm a bit spooked, You know, so I mean, essentially, I'm like gripping my steering wheel. What's the it's like you grip your, I was gripping my steering wheel at like 10 and 3 or whatever, you know, the Ohio instructed way to grip your steering wheel. I'm furiously gripping my steering wheel, and I am just stone faced forward. I'm not moving an inch. I am not looking to my right. I didn't do anything wrong. At least I don't think I did. Turning on my blinker, signaling that I'm going around and speeding up a little bit does not make me a bad person, okay? But I am just stone-faced, and the guy wasn't banging on his door anymore, he wasn't yelling, but you could tell he was still pissed because there was still movement out of the peripheral of my view. And I was stone-faced looking forward, and that light turned green, and I have never in my life just punched it as fast as I just did. Not like I was going 45 and a 35. Don't usually do that, obviously, but I had to get out of there. And this guy in the white car was still going 25 miles per hour down the road. Like, I could see him in my rearview mirror, and he kept getting farther and farther and farther away. And I'm like, I mean, like, you're getting this angry at people serving around you when you're driving 25 and a 35. I get it when it's a 25 and a 25. That's the speed limit, right? The signs are there for a reason, obviously. More, you know, obviously me and a lot of other people, and most people on the road, want to go faster. But it's not a sin to go 25 and a 25. It's just annoying, right? For most people. It is a sin, though, to go 25 and a 35, okay? That is a genuine sin. You're going to hell, okay? Quote me on that. I don't care. That's a sin. Going 10 below the speed limit and a 35, you're wild, you're crazy, you're kooky. So I don't know what happened to the guy after that. Once I turned down my street, I made sure he wasn't following me. I didn't have to like pass up my house and go somewhere else, right? So I was able to kind of get home and be fine. But there's people like that on the road nowadays that are just kind of crazy, and you just don't want anything to do with it. And my advice to anyone who is dealing with a road rage incident is to not escalate it. You know, don't even talk back to them at points, you know, when they're going super crazy. I mean, sometimes not talking back will actually get them more angry, so you do want to keep some sort of vocal thing going on, but I know there's a lot, like when worlds collide is when two people who are, like, both rage drivers, you know, they butt heads, right? That's when, like, worlds collide and all hell breaks loose. There's two people who have hot heads who are on the road, they're in their vehicles, and they're just, like, swerving around each other, and they're doing brake checks, and I've seen stuff like that on the freeway, and it's not, I mean, there's obviously tons of videos, too, that you can watch on that of people doing these things on the freeway and other places, but it gets crazy. It just gets crazy. And I drive so much, you'd think I would see more, but luckily the area that I'm in is not, like, super crazy. It just kind of happens every so often. I've never seen this guy before, and I probably will never see them again. That's the other thing, too. Like, if someone, like, cuts you off or doesn't stop fully at a stop sign and goes ahead of you or whatever, like, sure, you can be pissed in the moment, but just know that you'll probably never see them on the road again. There are so many times where it's like, I get kind of angry, and I'm like, why did this person cut me off? Or one of the biggest times that I got angry when I was driving was there was a ambulance coming behind me, but it was like it was like a mile or two away at this point, like it maybe even more, like 5 miles away still. So I'm driving and I'm kind of slowing down because it's like, okay, it's going to be coming this way. I got to get ready to stop, right? But the person besides me sees the ambulance coming, and they immediately start merging, expecting me to, like, stop when it's still, like, 5 fucking miles away. It's still got to go through 2 traffic lights. It's like, what are we doing here? You know, it could turn. It could turn, too. So this person is merging into me, and I'm still right there beside them. So I honk my horn really loud. You know, I do the biggest honk that I can in my car. And this person swerves over, and they start yelling, like, what are you doing? There's an ambulance, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I just point backwards, like, you see how far this shit is away? And in my head, I'm like, why, like, am I in the wrong? Like, should I be stopping earlier? No, of course not. No, of course not. It's 2 traffic lights behind me. It could turn. It could do whatever, right? It ended up passing us, but by that time, this person had sped up and stopped in front of me, so I was forced to stop early. But I mean, come on, it's like one of those things. Like what, like what the? I mean, there's that Reddit that's like, "Am I the asshole?" Like that's a perfect like, "Am I the asshole?" story where it's like I didn't slow down soon enough for the ambulance or something like that. I don't know. I think the other person was being kind of crazy, trying them like just not even looking and merging into me because there's an ambulance coming. The ambulance is too far away at this point. What do you want me to say? I'm not gonna slow down until the ambulance is at least like, I don't know, a mile behind me. I mean, it's hard to like imagine that in without being on the road, but I a lot of times I count the road by telephone poles. So like if the ambulance is like 5 telephone poles behind me, I'll start pulling over. Even sooner, really. So yeah, I got pretty heated though, because I was like, this person was yelling at me and like saying that I'm in the wrong. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, you started merging into me, and yeah. But once again, looping this all around, I'm never gonna see this person again on the road, most likely, unless they live next to me. I never saw them again. That's the thing that happens with most interactions on the road. There's so many people in the world. Are you really going to see the same person twice? And that being said, if you do see the person again, usually it's like weeks or like a month later, and you forget the interaction even happened at all. I have a memory like an elephant for some reason at times, so I remember, but most people won't. Thank you for the resub, C Fuzzy Man. I really appreciate that. Really appreciate that. Thank you so much. I hope everyone in the chat is doing well today. I hope you've been having a good time here. Let's do a check-in here. We got General Kenobi, Callus, Greedy, C Fuzzy Man, of course, and Lucy just joining in. I hope everyone's doing great today. We're gonna do the DQ story in a second here. I started with the other one first because I knew people wanted to hear the DQ, the DQ story. Yeah. Greetings. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that a little bit because it is. I mean, I have a very I drive a lot for my job. My job is pretty much like 50% driving and 50% like waiting around. So I do see a lot on the road, and I don't have a camera in my car. It is one of those things I kind of want to get because the roads are getting a bit more, I don't know, people are getting a bit more aggressive while driving, and I think it is a good idea if you do drive a lot for like a company or whatever. I think that it would be a good idea for that because, I mean, cameras show exactly what happened, and I've had it before where, like, someone rear-ended my other half a long time ago at this point, probably about 7 or so years ago, and, like, the police report was, like, almost completely wrong, except for, the person who rear-ended her. It's like, how did they get this so wrong? Like, they're writing down exactly what they're saying, like, yeah, we were stopped at a light and the person rear-ended us. We decided to pull over onto a side street so that we didn't obstruct traffic because the cars are so drivable. But the police officer wrote down that, like, they hit them, they hit us from behind on the side road and we were turning left or something. I was like, what are you talking? Like, this is, I mean, it didn't matter in the long run, but still, it's like, All right. I do, excuse me, I am still a little bit sick. So if I have to clear my throat every so often, that is why. All right, let's talk about this, the top story of today, folks. I was listening to a podcast and they mentioned that there was some huge Dairy Queen drama, so I had to listen. And when they told this, they talked about this news story, I knew that I had to bring you the latest and greatest, the hottest news to you as well. And I looked into it a little bit more, and there's not a lot of information regarding this event that happened. But let's start from the top, and then we'll go from there. All right. So picture this: we're in Kentucky, Campton, Kentucky, and you are an employee at Dairy Queen, and the manager calls every single person who works at this Dairy Queen and says, "Hey, you got to come in for a mandatory meeting." And at this mandatory meeting, the manager is yelling at you, and they say that you're not cleaning the ice cream machines good enough. And you are leaving soap residue inside of the ice cream machines, and customers are complaining. So the manager then in turn pulls out a blizzard made with chocolate ice cream with cleaning solution mixed into it. And that manager then forces you to take a big old bite of said soapy blizzard. Now, I don't know about you, but I am a fan of blizzards. I love the chocolate chip cookie dough blizzard. It's my favorite thing ever. But I don't love blizzards enough to try the cleaning solution blizzard. It just doesn't seem appetizing to me. The real kicker of this whole story is that at this mandatory meeting, not only were there adults there, but there was also young teenagers who were working there, during the summer hours, right? This happened in 2023, so this was during summer last year. And there was minors working, they're teenagers. They're working, a 3-hour shift or whatever, of course. And the manager actually forced them to partake in the soapy soap blizzard. Now, I don't know exactly what was inside this blizzard. That information was not revealed. There's a lot of things that are not revealed because there are minors involved, so the police are like, we can't really talk about it because of that. I can only guess that there was some sort of soap mixture with bleach or something in it, because we used to use like a soap with some bleach in it for McDonald's back when I worked there. That was the main cleaning formula. So the people who were forced to eat some chocolate soap blizzard reported that they had burning sensations in their mouths and going down their throats after eating it. Some of them went to the emergency room, and 8 employees quit on the spot. They did not partake, and they quit right there. I don't know why a single person ate this, to be honest with you. But some people did, and they are now suing Dairy Queen, which, okay, so of course you're going to sue the corporation, obviously. That's a no-brainer. I don't think that Dairy Queen is at fault here. I think it's a single person whose power went to their head. So I don't think that Dairy Queen is kind of responsible for this, but they did put they put this person who's kind of crazy in a position of power. And this person who is in this position of power, who represents the company, did do something pretty dubious, if you want to call it that. So, why would
a dubious little creature getting up to mischief?
So why would the manager do this? And the only thing that I can think of is that once again, either the teenagers or whoever was supposed to clean the machines weren't cleaning them properly, and customers were saying there's a funny taste to my ice cream, or my ice cream smelled like soap or something. I don't know, something like that. So what the manager did is they put the cleaning solution into the blizzard, and they were like, hey, this is what our customers are getting. It was probably more forceful than that, but they're, that's like, I'm trying to put myself in their shoes. Like, okay, if I was a manager and the kids or the teenagers weren't listening to me, or the people at the store weren't listening to me, they aren't cleaning the machine right over and over again, even though I keep telling them, like, hey, we gotta do this better. We gotta make sure that we get all the solution out of the machine before we do. Like, I'm trying to put myself in that position, and like, I think the way that I would have handled it is I fill up a Blizzard cup with like the cleaning solution with a little bit of ice cream in there, and I show it to them. I say, hey, this is what we're feeding our customers when you don't clean the machine properly. And no one has to eat it, no one has to drink it. Just look at it and see, like, oh wow, that's kind of gross. The cleaning solution in the cup with the ice cream, like, that's kind of gross. Give it a whiff. That chocolate and bleach smell, my favorite, right? I think that's the way to go about it. Forcing your employees to eat the solution inside of the chocolate ice cream is definitely not the way to go about it. But I can see a world. There's a multiverse. There's a world where the manager did this right and they were praised, right? But in this case, the manager did it completely wrong, and now they're fired, and of course, they are probably going to be, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if criminal charges, but they're going to be reprimanded in some way. But, 1 second. But yeah, I just think, like, yeah, you go about it the completely wrong way, and forcing people to eat it is just a whole nother level here, right? You're put in a position of power. People are going to follow what you say because you're put in this position of power. But the problem is that the power goes to the person's head, and they think that, they are like the master or whatever, and you are all the pawns. And so they can do whatever they want. And a lot of these kind of restaurants will have multiple managers. It's possible that this is like some like backwater part of the U.S. in Kentucky that only has one manager at the Dairy Queen. So it's possible that there's not multiple managers. Or this manager went behind the other managers' backs. and obviously the people who own the Dairy Queen's backs and did this themselves. It's possible. It's always possible, or the other managers were like, we'll deal with it, or whatever. Look, if I would, like, once again, if I was in this person's place, if I was in this person's shoes, you go to the higher ups. You say, hey, we need better training on this stuff, or you do call the mandatory meeting, and you lay out the reasons why it's so dangerous and it's disgusting to leave cleaning solution inside of the ice cream machines, if that's exactly what happened. And you work through it that way. You don't force people to eat something that has like thousands like chemicals in it. Like it's rule number 1 in any science class is that you don't drink from a beaker because you don't know what was in it last. Well, you don't drink from the you don't drink from the bleach bottle because there was bleach in it. It's just a common fact of life. So yeah, it's a pretty weird story, but it's also one that I feel like is kind of it's a bit dark too, but it's also kind of entertaining, I guess. Just to kind of be like, hey, this is the kind of shit that people are dealing with for some reason. I've been out of the fast food business for quite some time, but there was a while where I was at McDonald's, and instead of promoting me to a manager position from a crew trainer to a manager, they kind of like demoted me to maintenance, which is something that I really didn't want to do because you smell like freaking grease and stuff all day, fryers all day and all night, and no matter how many showers you take, you can't get it out of your hair and your smell of your clothes. And that's kind of what got me to end up quitting. It was like, I don't want to do this. Like, you're forcing me into this position. And once again, all these people who were forced to eat the Dairy Queen soap, like, yeah, just quit. I know that it's not easy to just quit, but there are some things that are more important, including your health. more important than a job at Dairy Queen. And I mean, once again, too, like these are teenagers, so it's possible. You see you see a person in power, an adult in power, and you just kind of do what they say because that's kind of what you're taught throughout your entire life is to listen to adults, right? Yeah, at that point, maybe think about it. maybe take an extra second before you put that spoonful of chemicals into your mouth, But I mean, the worst part is thinking about it. That first person who took a bite of the Dairy Queen soap blizzard probably wasn't even told what it was. That the manager was probably like, hey, we're all going to take a bite of this and you're going to tell me what's wrong with it, right? And so the first person probably took like a big spoonful. They were like, okay, it's probably, maybe it's got something incorrect mixed in there. Like, I don't know, they put pretzels in the cookie dough or whatever. I don't know. And instead they got, burns down their throat. Pretty fun. So yeah, that's the DQ soap blizzard. If you would like to try that flavor, put a 1 in chat. Me personally, like I said, I am a fan of blizzards, but I ain't gonna try the soap blizzard. You know what I'm saying? I ain't gonna try that. I ain't gonna try that soap blizzard, man. I mean, what are we doing here? What the fuck are we doing here? This is America. This is America. Okay, speaking of America, well, actually, this is kind of like a worldwide thing, but actually, what time is it? We're going for about 30 minutes. That's the time I allotted for the other things, so we'll see how long this goes, because this is actually a pretty interesting topic that I've been thinking about, because there is, it's hard to believe, but there was a time in the world where you would settle your disagreements by shooting each other. And I don't mean in like a gang war, or whatever. Or like wartime. There was a time when, let's say, someone disrespected you, and you chose a weapon and fought each other with said weapons. And what? It's a time period that is it was most popular during like the like middle ages to like the like kind of like before the Industrial Revolution, right? Back during the time of sword fight and flintlock pistols, And I kind of went to a deep dive on the subject on my own time. And I was like, this is fucking interesting. This is some cool shit, very interesting stuff. But where do you start with dueling, right? Like, the dueling has to have been around for quite some time, right? And yeah, there was, some dueling in the medieval times, the Middle Ages, right? Around like 1215 is kind of when you started to have people push against dueling, which is kind of crazy that early in time. But I mean, there's depictions of dueling all the way back to like 1159 in like parts of Japan. Obviously, even before that, there was stuff depicted back in the Renaissance. Actually, the Renaissance is after the 1215s, but there were accounts of dueling all the way back then. Also, Vikings had a whole society based on the warrior, and there was a duel-like ceremony that they would do called the Holmgang, which essentially a Viking would challenge another Viking after their honor has been tarnished, I guess, but the Vikings didn't have to use the same weapons on both sides. That's kind of the crazy thing about the Vikings part of this. Is like one guy would be like, I'm going to use an axe. And the other guy's like, I have a shield and a sword. And it's kind of like, okay, okay, interesting. But dueling did evolve. Much like most things in society, dueling did evolve as technology got greater, as people's disagreements became, I don't know, more palpable, I suppose. So during the Middle Ages, they actually called dueling, the 1v1, judicial combat, which essentially was kind of a religious thing a little bit here, because this kind of meant like God would choose who is right in the situation, and that person would win, and the other person would lose and or die, right? And here's the thing about dueling that's is also kind of interesting, is actually the mortality rate is not as big as you would expect. A lot of people got injured and were like, okay, it's over. Or a lot of people actually stopped the fight, like to stop the duel before it even started. So the mortality rate isn't as high as you would say, but, you know, there was still like, I don't know, 10,000 people killed in duels between the 1500s and the 1600s. So, you know, it's still a pretty good chunk of people, but, you know, you kind of expect more here or there, you know. You kind of do expect those numbers to be a bit more exaggerated. So yeah, so you know, up until like I would say the 1500s to 1600s, there really wasn't any like documentation or anything like that on how a duel should go, or it was kind of all just like word of mouth, like, hey, we're gonna, you know, you insulted my wife, let's duel, you know. Eventually, you know, the person who was called out would get to choose the weapon, and then, you know, whoever won, obviously. So with it being sort of tied to a religious angle during the Middle Ages, having it be judicial combat instead of it just being like someone going out and killing someone, this prevented kills of passion. So someone needed a reason to go out and kill someone, or else you would kind of get into trouble, right? So instead of it just being like, oh, you want to date the same woman as me, let's duel for her. That was a bit more. It wasn't as widely spread as you think it would be. You know, a lot of plays, a lot of movies, kind of like even like that Ghost TV show that aired on the BBC had a guy who died from dueling because he whatever, right? Most of the time it actually wasn't because of something like that. It's because someone insulted your wife, insulted you personally through either word of mouth or through newspapers or something like that, and you would call them out and you would duel them. It wasn't so much like, hey, I love this person and you also love this person, let's duel for her. Even though it did happen, it was more so a political thing. It was more so an honor thing as well. And actually, if you don't know, dueling was actually banned by the church. And even furthermore, the King Louis VIII and his successor, Louis IX, in 1626, started writing legislature to prevent people from dueling. Obviously, it didn't work because we have stories all the way up until the 1850s of people dueling. But that being said, it's interesting that all the way back in the early 1600s, even back to like the 1200s, people who were like, you know, in church or whatever, these leaders of the churches and stuff like that, condemned this sort of thing. And you kind of expect like, oh, back in the 1200s, it was like the Wild West out there. No one had any rules. It was just whoever wants to do whatever, right? Wrong. There was plenty of rules and stuff against dueling. It was banned by the church. Banned by the church all around, especially in France, and it kept going on. Dueling actually comes from a Latin term called duelen, which means war, when combined with, what's the other word? Something. When combined with something. I don't remember what it was, but it essentially just means war. Which, yeah, whatever. I mean, I guess it is kind of like a mini war. What's the Latin word for small? I think that would have been better. Small war, small duel. I don't know. So we wouldn't see any real documentation about dueling until some people in the Italian Renaissance decided to write a code of dueling. And this is estimated to be sometime around the 1600s. It's not sure when exactly it was published. But it was called Code Duello, which was a set of rules for one-on-one combat or dueling, which regulated dueling, which prevented vendettas between families and other social functions and factions, meaning that you quote-unquote amicably fought each other, and then whoever won. And it didn't matter what the other people in your family thought or other people in your friend group thought. The person won. That's it. Leave it. It's done. Like this is the end of that. So it was kind of like in the 1600s when that came out, and then there was a more there was an English version of it made by the Irish. A group of Irish men made a document in 1777, which detailed 26 rules for dueling. And you might be wondering what some of those were. Time of day was pretty important. The person who wanted the duel or started the duel would choose the time of day. The person who was dishonored says, "Hey, I want to duel you," and the person that he chooses the duel gets to choose the weapons, the number of shots in the pistol, what weapons, and then later on the number of shots in the pistol if they use a pistol, right? So a famous one is actually Andrew Jackson, who it was like a 1 or 2 shot kind of thing, and Andrew Jackson actually fired his gun. His gun misfired, meaning that the powder didn't go off. It didn't send the bullet careening towards his opponent, which I'll talk about later, of course. But essentially, he pressed the trigger on his gun twice, which is seen as dishonorable because there is, in dueling, there is a practice of, okay, we shoot 1 shot or we fight with swords for a minute, and then we get the rest, and we get the reload, and then we do it again. They also get to choose how far away the opponents stand between each other. There was a famous duelist who could hit people from 100 feet away with an old flintlock pistol, which is pretty impressive for that time period. So there's a whole bunch of different rules in here. If you want to check all of them out, there you go. Whatever. But there was 26 rules detailed in there. Eventually, it came over to the Americas, and it was Americanized, which I don't think there's really a big difference, but it's one of those things. It's like, okay, it was Americanized. There were some things kind of changed here and there. The Americanized version was written in 1838 by Governor John Lyde Wilson from South Carolina. So a political person in power, actually approved and wrote the new version of the Code Duello, as they say. Which goes back to my point of that dueling is pretty much a political thing during this time period. A lot of times political people would be talking back and forth with each other, and then they would choose to duel each other when it got too heated. Someone says something over the line, and the other person doesn't like that. They feel dishonored, and boom, bada bing, you're 10 paces from each other shooting flintlock pistols in the general directions. After the Americanized version was written in the 1800s, it's not like dueling just bursted into popularity, but it became much more popular as people started to do it a lot more. In the Americanized version, one of the changes was that it implemented a second, which is like a person outside of the conflict who judges it, essentially. And this second would essentially take, let's say that the people aren't right next to each other when they say, I want to duel you. Let's say it is like, I saw this written in the newspaper about me and I want to shoot the editor, right? They dishonored me. I'm going to do a duel with them. So the second would actually go to the editor in this case, and they would say, hey, John Smith wants to duel you. And then if the person accepts, then they would choose the time, the day and the time, and then what weapons. And then the second would go back to the person who wanted the duel in the first place and tell them all the details. Now, inside this documentation, there was also plenty of ways to solve the duels amicably without bloodshed. It's actually a big thing in this that a lot of people dueling, not many of them wanted to bow out, but there is some pretty famous cases of people being like, hey, I'm going to use this clause. It's like, if I apologize, the duel's off, right? So actually, at any point between the duel being called for and the duel starting, you can actually apologize, and there would be no violence. They would not go on. You would apologize, possibly shake hands, I don't know, and then leave, right? If the fighting had started and the other person is wounded, they can also call it there if they so desire. It is actually up to the person who is wounded if they want to keep going. So also the secondary would also determine if honor is satisfied, right? So they would be, instead of it being the person who called for the duel, at any point if the person apologizes, the secondary could be like, okay, that satisfies your honor, it's done, right? Or during the fight, if the person gets wounded, the secondary can say, hey, he's too wounded to continue, the honor is yours, it's over, right? If the person dies, of course, then it's like, okay, yeah, the honor's restored, whatever. So I think that's a pretty interesting thing, though, and I know that we know people's egos nowadays. Just imagine back in the day with, it's a new country. The USA isn't like the USA yet. It's still a group of colonists, right? It's just bedlam out there, and there's people just going into fields and shooting each other. Come on, like it's pretty crazy that even during these earlier times, at least in our nation and even other places as well, like France and Britain and stuff like that, Germany, that they had an out at all times. There was an out for either of the opponents at all times. Because I think most people didn't want the other person to die, right? Or maybe most people in the audience really didn't want them to die. Like, sure, they want to see a duel, but, once flintlock pistols were invented, swords kind of became unnecessary. Like, during the early times of the duel, it was pretty much like swords, fencing, When flintlock pistols came around, it kind of changed the whole thing, because now it's like, okay, instead of it being like, okay, we duel, and if you get stabbed, you can bleed out, at any time. One stab to the neck, one stab to the chest, they're just dead, right? With the flintlock pistol, it's like, this thing is so inaccurate. The bullet comes out of the chamber and could go any direction. It's real, minus backwards, obviously, but the bullet can go anywhere. You get hit in the face, you get hit in the chest, you get hit in the arm, you get hit in the leg. It misses you entirely. It's all about the same. It's all about the same probability, which is kind of crazy. So it goes from being like this duel of fates-esque thing where you're matching the other person's training in the art of sword fighting to being like, okay, who's luckier, essentially, which also feeds into the notion of God chooses who wins. He chooses who was right. And I think the flintlock pistol is a much better example for something like that, because it is entirely random. It is pretty much being left up to God or a higher power who wins in that situation, right? So let's go back. Let's go back in time, folks. We're going back to the 1600s here. What was the first duel ever recorded in the Americas? In American history. And people who immigrated to the U.S. should know this one. No, I'm kidding. So the first duel in American history, pretty famously, was a duel between two servants. And usually, a duel is between two gentlemen. So, it's actually quite crazy that, one, this is the first duel in American history ever in 1621. And two, it's one of the only times that two servants dueled each other, because it was usually people of higher class, nobility, gentlemen, as they're called, right? So that's the interesting thing about this. The uninteresting thing is that it was a sword duel, and both of them walked away with minor wounds. There really wasn't nothing really happened. But this is only 1 year after the Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock. So this is early shit, right? This is early shit. These two guys, I think they were French servants. They just had some sort of dispute on the way over, and or while they were working, I guess, and they just said, you know what? Fuck you. I'm going to stab you with a sword. Once again, though, they both walked away with minor wounds, so I guess it wasn't too bad there. So going back to the flintlock pistol, if you don't know what a flintlock pistol is, it's a one-shot gun. You load the bullet from the into the muzzle pretty much, and then you also put in gunpowder as well, and then you pull the hammer back, and essentially the hammer strikes, ignites with a spark. It ignites the gunpowder and then shoots out of the barrel. Back in the day, the with muskets and flintlock pistols, very inaccurate because the bullet, it was like a crudely made ball of iron or whatever, and it would essentially shoot out and just kind of like, it would bounce around the barrel while shooting out, so you never knew exactly where it was going to go. Like, it will go a general direction, sure, but who knows if it's going to go too low, too high, to the left, to the right, center. It was very, the technology just wasn't there yet. Like, imagine dueling now with how accurate pistols are, how accurate rifles are, and stuff like that. People would be dying left and right because you turn around and you shoot your gun, and it just goes where you want it to go. It goes exactly where you're pointing. Even in the Old West, they still had, I mean, even though revolvers are much more accurate than flintlock pistols, obviously, they still had trouble sometimes with the bullet going exactly where they want, especially with the way that old Western duels work. They pull the gun from their holster, and then they shoot when they when they pull it up, right? So, the bullet still could go anywhere. It's more accurate, obviously. It's not going to go in zany different directions like the flintlock pistol. But there was still like that randomness factor where it's like, okay, I shot my bullet too early and it hit the guy in the thigh or in the arm or whatever. I was just a little bit off. So it kind of harkens back to the flintlock pistol days where it's like, okay, I pulled my, you have your pistol at your chest, you turn around, you aim it at the guy, and you fire one shot. And it's like, I don't know where this bullet's going to go. Maybe it is going to hit him in the face. Maybe it'll just hit his foot. I don't know. No one knows. All I know is that it's going that direction, and if it misses or not, I don't know. It's a flip of the coin, really. So flintlock pistols were actually used between 1750 all the way to 1850, right around when the Civil War started. That's kind of when revolvers and more accurate rifles started being made. People were still using muskets and stuff, but the flintlock pistol was definitely being phased out, and it was almost completely phased out by the time the Civil War came around, which also, I don't want to spoil it, but essentially the Civil War era and into World War I was kind of the end of dueling as we know it. There were no more duels going off at that point because, once again, like I said, the death count would be like that 10,000 number that I read off before. Double that if they had accurate pistols and accurate weapons, and double that if they weren't using swords, they were using automatic machine guns. And more people would be dying in much bigger quantities. And I think that by the time that that better weaponry came around, people realized like, oh shit, yeah, this isn't so much an act of God, it's more so an act of, who can shoot the trigger first, which isn't as exciting, I suppose, but also public opinion changes and just people were not into the dueling anymore by the time that it came around. But that's me going a little bit too far. We're still in the in the olden times here. Once again, like I said, there was a low chance of dying in the old days to the flintlock pistol, and sword fighting. Obviously, you still could die easily, but the chances of dying from a single shot to like the stomach or the leg or the arm was much lower than you would kind of expect. Same thing with sword dueling, especially fencing. A lot of times it was like a puncture wound. You kind of get wounded, and during that time, like, yeah, you can literally die from a tiny little scrape because they didn't have the modern medical that we have today. But it was still much less. There was much lower chance of actually dying, which is kind of unbelievable if you ask me. Also, the flintlock pistol would misfire all the time. I already told the story of Andrew Jackson, one of the presidents of the United States of America, trying to fire his gun and the shot not working because it misfired, just for him to try and shoot it again. So, it was actually a high chance of misfiring, which is also, you could say, an act of God as well. There was only 3 seconds to fire your pistol. Obviously, with sword fighting, you kind of just start, and whoever wins, wins. But with the pistols, there was a rule inside that 26 document that I was talking about, the Americanized version, that you had 3 seconds to fire. Once you turned around, you had 3 seconds to fire. Any longer than that, and it's deemed dishonorable. And there was punishments to go along with that. They would put your face in the newspaper, and they would, and word of mouth would go around like, oh, this guy, he didn't fire his gun. Oh, he's such a coward. Blah 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 blah. Whatever. All right, let's talk about some more famous duels here, just to kind of liven things up a little bit. 1802, a political smearing campaign was done against John. Ooh, my handwriting is atrocious right here. John Swatwart, by DeWitt Clinton. And so essentially, John chose 5 rounds each, but it could all be over if DeWitt had signed an apology. There was an apology note that John had made up and written out, and he was like, all you have to do is sign this apology letter, and we don't have the duel. So what happened was John got shot in both the thigh and the ankle, and the duel ended when DeWitt did not want to continue anymore because he thought it was more dishonorable to kill a wounded man or fight against a wounded man, right? And in this case, for some reason, there wasn't a secondary to decide that. It was just like John wanted to keep up and keep fighting, But in this case, DeWitt Clinton essentially was like, hey, you've been shot twice. I think this is over. And of course it was over. But once again, it could have all been solved if the person had just signed his name onto the apology letter. Although, if it's the olden days, so who knows what was in that. Another famous one was a guy named Button Gwinnett, who versed a general, Lacken McIntosh. Crazy names, I know. And essentially, the reason that this is a famous duel is because Button Gwinnett signed the Declaration of Independence. And I don't think that anyone died from this duel, but it's just kind of a famous one because this involves one of the founding fathers of the nation. Pretty crazy. Talking about founding fathers, Ben Franklin and George Washington. Did you know that they 1v1'd? No, I'm kidding. They didn't. Actually, Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were very opposed to the idea of dueling, which is also very interesting, very forward-thinking. George Washington, the first president of the United States of America, set a lot of precedents for how we do things nowadays with terms and only having 8 years and blah, 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 blah. He was very much against the idea of dueling because he needed more soldiers in his army to fight the Revolutionary War. And he actually applauded any officers who ended their arguments amicably without dueling. He actually gave them medals and actually promoted them. So, essentially, he needed warm bodies, essentially. And he was like, dueling is not helping in this. Ben Franklin, though, being the inventor and philosopher that he was, I suppose you could say, he condemned it as well, saying that murderous, why am I so bad with handwriting here? Murderous parties decide nothing. I probably got that wrong, but I cannot read my handwriting at this point. So Ben Franklin was very against it, along with George Washington, two very famous figures in American history. Of course, Ben Franklin, known for flying his kite, inventing the bifocals. George Washington, obviously famously led armies during the Revolutionary War and became the first president of the United States of America. Boom, bada, bing. There was also a very famous reverend called Mason Weems, who actually wrote an entire entire report called God's Revenge Against Dueling. And of course, it was a very anti-dueling ordinance saying that if you do this, then you are not allowed into the gates of heaven, right? So, which of course apparently didn't scare people enough because eventually, because dueling did not stop when this came out. People kept going for another like 100 years after this. So it's like, wow, okay then, maybe not 100, but like 50 years. Dueling was actually banned in Washington D.C. It's now called, and the people actually would go to a place called Bladensburg, Maryland, to duel. So you knew if someone was taking a carriage ride to Maryland, you knew what they were going to do, especially if they were going from Washington to Maryland. You kind of knew what they were going to do. And at this time, there wasn't like a police force or anything like that out there to implement any of these banned rules or, banned dueling things. It was just kind of like, they're doing it, whatever, we'll worry about it later. So people, politicians, newspaper editors, attorneys even would be dueling in Maryland instead of Washington because they couldn't. It was just so outlawed that even like the people who lived there didn't want it. So yeah, most popular dueling spot was actually in Maryland. Funny enough. Let's talk about some more famous duels. Spice it up again. I already talked about the Andrew Jackson one. Andrew Jackson, future president of the United States of America at the time, was a formidable duelist apparently. In a duel against Charles Dickinson in 1806, Jackson fired twice after a misfire, like I said. And when he shot his pistol the second time, it actually immediately killed Charles Dickinson. And everyone was like, "Wow, you fucking idiot! You went against the rules and the code of conduct." And actually, it was called murder at the time. Of course, he wasn't put into jail or anything like that. He eventually became president, but it was regarded as murder at the time when he did that because it was against the rules. You're not supposed to, if your gun misfires, you got to give the other person a chance to try and fire again. So he made an oopsie there, but it might have ended up saving his life. So whatever. I talked about a person who could shoot people from 100 feet away and do kill shots. A man named Alexander McClung is the famous duelist I was talking about. He killed very many people. I think he had over like 50 to 100 kills to his name, most of them from 20 feet or more, which at the time is pretty crazy. He must have been forward thinking in some way with the design of his flintlock pistol, because that sort of consistent accuracy, especially from 100 feet away, is just insane. Here's the thing though, he was so good at killing people that he was actually haunted by the ghosts of his victims, and eventually he turned his own famous pistol against himself in 1855 and lost the duel with life. That was pretty poetic. That was pretty fucking poetic. I gotta say, thank you. Awesome duel, yeah. Write that one down. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about another aspect of dueling here that I kind of already touched upon. What happened if you refused dueling? I already kind of talked about how people would, publish newspaper articles and stuff saying like, this guy's a fucking coward. This was actually mostly in the southern states. They would actually also put up wanted posters, essentially, that just kind of was like a picture of you, and then it said "coward" on it or something like that, which was pretty crazy. But like I said before, by the time the Civil War came around, and especially World War I, worldwide, dueling had essentially diminished at that point. And actually, it wasn't because of legislation. It wasn't because of politics or religion. It was simply because people were tired of it. Public opinion had changed so much on dueling that people were like, you know what? Fuck this. I guess you could say that society kind of matured a bit during that time, and people were like, well, we can settle disputes differently at this point. And it's also could have been because too many people were dying from this, even though it wasn't the numbers that you would think it would be. It was still a good amount of people, and during the time between 1600 and 1850 or whatever, even closer to World War One, like 1900, people were having so many children because people were dying left and right. I mean, I think the average age expectancy was like 40 to 50 years old. So it's one of those things. It's like, okay, this is also not helping humanity as a whole, I guess you could say. So there you go. We've been talking a lot about the U.S. There's one more person that I need to talk about who had a famous duel, and that was future President Abraham Lincoln. In Illinois, he was a state legislator, and he actually was supposed to duel a guy named James Shields, who was an auditor. But Abe Lincoln's friends actually intervened and persuaded the two to solve it amicably. And who knows what would have happened if they actually did duel, but pretty crazy to think about that. Abraham Lincoln, a notoriously famous and I would say one of the top 10 presidents of all time, maybe even top 5, could have been killed much earlier in 1842 against this James Shields guy who, it was probably a dispute between like, hey, your top hat shouldn't be taller than mine. That's dishonorable. Famously, Mark Twain, known for his greatest hits like Tom Sawyer, also famous Rush song, avoided fighting a duel with a rival newspaper editor. At the time, he was contributed to New York Sunday Mercury, which is a newspaper, a weekly newspaper, which was in New York. And of course, kind of like with Abraham Lincoln, we talk about the second and how the second kind of decides things. The second actually intervened for Mark Twain and said that, or told the guy from the other newspaper how good Mark Twain was with a pistol. And essentially the other guy was like, oh, never mind, I apologize. So Mark Twain, of no way of his own, got out of his own duel because the person who was in charge of going to the other person being like, okay, he accepted your duel, was like, he accepted your duel, but this guy's a whiz with a pistol. You know what I'm saying? Like, this guy can hit a quail egg from 500 feet or whatever he said, So once again, another famous person in U.S. history could have been snuffed out before their time because of this silly little dueling. And that was actually in 1864 when dueling was kind of getting less and less popular. But we've been talking about America a lot here. There are other places that had plenty of famous duels. In France in 1808, two Frenchmen fought in balloons over Paris. So they got into like hot air balloons, and they were trying to puncture each other's balloons. One duelist was shot down and killed within seconds. So, it's not funny, but it's also pretty fucking funny. The fucking hot air balloon duel. Oh my god. Oh man, that's fucking hilarious. But not funny at all, actually. That's actually very tragic. In 1843, another group of Frenchmen fought with billiard balls. The person who was doing the duel, I guess, was like, "Hey, let's just throw billiards at each other." No one died in that one, so not as fun. Not as tragic. Not as tragic. The fucking hot air balloon duel is probably the best out of this list. I'm going to be honest with you guys. In 1832, also in France, two mathematicians were dueling, and the one guy was mortally wounded, and apparently the night before the duel, he wrote such good mathematics that people think that he was given like an apparition or whatever from God or whoever, because he knew that he was going to die. He wrote like some pretty important math stuff, but of course that was more of like an urban legend. But still, it's like one of those things. Like, okay, all right, okay. It was actually, dueling was actually pretty famous in Ireland. Of course, that's where the second version of the rules of dueling came from. And a political leader named Daniel O'Connell killed a guy named John D. Esther in February of 1815. O'Connell actually offered D'Ester's widow a pension equal to the amount that her husband had been earning at the time. Which was like the corporation Dublin. He was earning like what, $15 a month or something like that. I don't even know. But D'Ester actually rejected O'Connell's offer, which is kind of crazy. And of course, D'Ester ended up losing the fight. He died. But O'Connell, being the nice guy he was, still gave his wife the compensation. The wife gave it to her daughter. So I guess it all kind of worked out in the end. In Russia, a poet named Alexander Pushkin was a pretty famous duelist in Russia, in Mother Russia. He was also a poet, playwright, and novelist during the Romantic era. He is, I guess, considered one of the greatest Russian poets known to man. Notably, he was in a duel with someone named Lenski, which Pushkin actually mortally wounded himself when his gun misfired into his thigh. So, oops. I think a similar story happened in that Band of Brothers show. The guy he was dueling against married Pushkin's sister-in-law down the road. So there you go. In Germany, the famous guy Otto von Bismarck, pretty famous. One of the famous ships from World War II was named the Bismarck. He challenged a guy named Rudolf Virchow to a duel, who was a physician, anthropologist, biologist, writer, etc., politician. Virchow chose the weapon. He chose 2 pork sausages. One of them, though, was infected with roundworms, which sounds kind of deadly. The 2 would choose to eat the sausage at random. Apparently, though, Bismarck, not a big fan of sausage, declined. He said, "No, thank you. I would rather not." And that was that. Now, if it was, if it was a Chipotle burrito, but we're talking about, talking different. But anyway. In Canada, one of the last known fatal duels in Ontario was in 1833. So, Canada, they kind of have a reputation for being nice. Not too many duels done around there. A guy named Robert Lyon, who was a son of a British officer, challenged a guy named John Wilson, who was a lawyer, judge, and political figure, to a pistol duel after a quarrel over remarks made about a local school teacher who Wilson married after Lyon was killed in the duel. So, I thought that was kind of interesting. He went ahead and married the teacher, the school teacher. So, but yeah, Robert Lyon lost. So, that's pretty much it. I mean, what do you want me to say? I think it's a pretty interesting subject, and of course, there's plenty more that I could talk about, but we kind of got the main points there. I would say dueling really became popular kind of around like the 17th, the 16th, 17th century, 18th century. And of course, the dueling had been around before that. Kenobi mentioned gladiators, back in the day, and yes, of course, gladiatorial matches were pretty much duels. But it wasn't about honor; it was more so about like who lives and dies. So it's kind of a little bit different, right? But yeah, it's kind of like starting around the 1200s, dueling kind of became a thing, and different cultures kind of had their own versions. But essentially, by the time that the 1700s, 1800s came around, there was like a code of conduct and all that. Even though plenty of different people, like kings and presidents and religious figures, tried to ban it, nope, people kept going. I mean, dueling was so widely accepted throughout the world. I mean, we're talking about Latin America, Russia, Greece, Italy, Ireland, America, Canada, Australia even. Australia had a huge history of dueling. The last duel was actually in 1851. Pretty crazy. India, Indonesia, Japan, of course. The Philippines. I mean, there's so many different places that had a form or went along with the whole dueling thing. And I would say that like the Japanese version of dueling, that's kind of depicted in plenty of classic Japanese movies and stuff like that. Two people fighting with katanas, I guess I should say one of the most famous swordsmen, Miyamoto Musashi. Actually, Japan had like an island specifically for duels called Funijima, and this Miyamoto Musashi guy said to have fought over 60 duels and was never defeated. So, there you go. There's a whole list of duels. They're not all interesting. I kind of went over the interesting ones with you guys. I'm not going to go through every single recorded duel in history, right? You can do that on your own time if you so desire. But I will say that it's a fascinating topic. It really is. And obviously dueling has taken on new forms and meanings throughout the years. Obviously dueling is still a big thing in the movies and stuff like that. Nowadays, I mean, you kind of replace dueling with arguments, essentially, like arguing back and forth. Most of the time it doesn't turn violent, but when it does, it kind of, it could be seen as a duel. But once again, a lot of duels nowadays, they're not really honorable. It's pretty much like one guy or girl, I guess, picking up a weapon and smacking someone across the head or shooting someone. So it's not like a thing about honor. It's more so like a heat of the moment kind of thing. So I mean, should we bring back the duels? No, I don't think we should bring back dueling, especially with how petty people can be at times. It's like, oh, you bumped into me in the hallway. Let's duel. Yeah, okay. Yeah. But it's an interesting time period. It's an interesting concept, and it's inspired plenty of things, from movies to plays to books. There seems to be a lot of dueling. Oh yes, of course. Rap battles are the modern day duel as well. Fight with words, essentially. Try and insult someone so badly that they never show their face again. I mean, yeah, there's some famous duels in Star Wars. But once again, it's more so like a good versus evil thing, not so much a honor kind of thing, right? Like Darth Maul didn't come down and like say like to Qui-Gon Jinn like, "Hey, your mama ugly," like he was a Sith. He was a Sith. I was a Jedi. Like it's kind of just, that's kind of the thing. Like, sure, it's a fun duel. The song playing is Duel of Fates of all things, but it's not exactly a duel, right? It's not about honor. It's more so about like, I'm a good guy, you're a bad guy. Let's do this, you know. Same thing with like Count Dooku versus Obi-Wan or Yoda and Anakin. Like that's a 3v1 at, you know, well, I guess it was a 2v1, then a 1v1, then a 2v1, then a 1v1. So yeah. You could say the duel at the end of Dune Part 1 was a duel. Two people using knives. One guy was dishonored, you know. So it's still prevalent in popular culture and stuff like that. It's not we don't practice it anymore, obviously. Like if we were still practicing it, that'd be kind of crazy. You know, that'd be kind of crazy. Once again, though, I just want to reiterate, it was public opinion that saw the death of duels, not just because it was outlawed and banned and looked frowned upon. It was pretty much just public perception of dueling was at an all-time low, and people just didn't want to didn't want to see duels anymore, which is kind of funny. That's kind of how things changed in that area. And I guess you could say nowadays, like, yeah, I guess public opinion also is at the forefront. You know, when things are changed in legislature or whatever, it takes a while for the public opinion to eventually turn. You know, so I guess the real motivating factor of anything is the people behind it. And if the people behind it don't want to do it anymore, or they don't, you know, they accept new things, then that's really the nail in the coffin. Because behind closed doors duels were quite a thing. Like I said before, people traveling to a different state because it was so strictly outlawed in one. Like, people are gonna find a way if they want to do it, you know. But there you go. There you go. And that's all I got planned for today, folks. And I did plan for like an hour and a half long show, so it's not like it's something crazy happened here, you know. I did plan for a little bit of a shorter show. I've been staying up way too late recently. I've been accidentally staying up until like midnight at some points, and it is accidentally because I'll just be lying in bed trying to go to sleep, and my brain will be thinking about things. You know, the classic kind of, you know, lie awake in bed with lie on your mind, of course. So I'm gonna try and head to bed a bit early today, which is why I planned for a shorter episode. But I hope everyone enjoyed. We're still going strong here. If you want to join Jeopardy, all you gotta do for me to, you know, make a new one, all you gotta do is to go over to the Discord and type in the Ferret Cafe section that, hey, I'm interested in doing Jeopardy, and if we get one or more people who also wants to do it, we'll do another show. It does take a little bit of preparation and a lot of work, so it's better to say that you want to do something early instead of at the last minute. So if, you know, two people want to do Jeopardy and then the third person's like, oh, I want to join too, that's not going to work, you know. So you just have to head
yeah, boy.
You just have to head into the Discord and say, hey, I want to do this. If you want to fast track things, you could always be like, hey, I challenge this person to a duel in Jeopardy. Kind of all comes around at full circle here. And if they accept, then there we go. But now that we've gotten like the first one out of the way, I think people will kind of be like, oh, okay. Yeah, you know, I understand what's going on here, and that's pretty cool. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see when the next one will be. I'm not gonna give like a time template for, you know, Jeopardy or anything like that. You know, like, oh, we gotta do one by April 30th or something like that. No, it's just whoever wants to do it, just do it, you know, or tell me that they want to do it. But we'll keep doing these every 2 weeks. Next week, I should have a pretty lengthy thing planned. I've been working on something for months and months and months at this point. And some people might already know what it is. I'm not going to give it away just in case I don't actually do it next time. But there is something that I've been planning for quite a while in the background. So maybe we'll get to the next time, but I'm not going to make any promises because it is a pretty big subject. But yeah, we'll keep doing these every other weekend. Once again, if you're listening to this on the VOD on like Spotify or Apple Podcasts or YouTube, don't forget to drop it a like. Don't forget to rate it 5 stars and leave it a review. That does help, I'm told by many different sources. And if you want to tune in live, we do this every other Thursday at 8 p.m. until about 10 p.m. On Thursdays. So instead of streaming, we do a podcast episode. Just kind of chill at night until we run out of things to talk about. There is a new episode of Film Freaks with a Z tomorrow. We talk about planes, trains, and automobiles. And there's also the fan vote attached to that one. So make sure you check that out in the Discord. Also, I guess I could kind of touch on this a little bit at the end here. I'm not posting stuff on Twitter anymore. I'll probably still post like podcast episodes and stuff, but I'm not posting when I'm going live. I'm not posting anything like that anymore. It's just become such a toxic platform. Every time I go on there, it's just an argument. It's a fight. It's something stupid. You know, it's something that I don't want to see. And Twitter, being how smart and well it's run, just pushes the worst shit to you because it gets views. Honestly, you know, the worse something is, the more eyes will be on it. Whether it be negative comments or positive comments, it doesn't matter. And I'm just kind of sick of it. I don't think I'm going to be using Twitter too much anymore. I'm barely even using it as it is right now. These past like couple of days, it's just become too much. I don't need to go on Twitter and see the 50th argument about The Last of Us Part 2 being too woke or some shit. Like, it's stupid. It's stupid shit. You know? Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? And the one thing recently, there was like an argument about like, you know, are there, you know, I don't want to get into it actually. I need to prepare for that more if I want to really get into those kind of discussions. But it just goes so far, so often, and it's always something like so stupid and mundane, or something that like should like, you know, why is the main character of this a woman? It's like it's basic shit like that. It's like, who cares? Like, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, I'm so sick of it. I really am. That's that. And I think Twitter it's going that direction because it starts at the top, and you kind of could see it coming from a mile away. But yeah, I think I'm about done with Twitter. And you might be like, oh, you can use Threads. I barely use Threads too. Like, I like Threads, I guess. I like it enough, but I'm not on it at all because I don't know. It's just not an app that I click when I'm bored, you know? Recently I've been doing crossword puzzles on my phone. There's a crossword puzzle app that gives you like 3 free ones a day. I've been doing that when I'm like super bored. So, you know. You don't like any social platforms, so you don't like Twitch, you don't like YouTube, you don't like Discord. Those are social platforms. Oh my gosh. You know, tangent time. Let me talk about the question of the day that comes up pretty often in that in those things. There's always a question about like, oh, would you rather give up watching movies and it was actually most recently in this Discord that I'm a part of. Yeah. Would you rather never use social media again or never watch another movie or TV show again? Like, I hate these fucking questions. These are questions for people who these are questions for people who are dumb. I hate these kind of questions. Would you rather never watch a movie again or never watch YouTube again? It's like, what kind of shit is that? Like, what kind of fucking stupid question? Like, who suggests these fucking questions, right? Who's out there suggesting, like, who's out there making these questions and being like, oh, this one's gonna have a lot of debate to it. It's like being like, would you rather pee the rest of your life or poop the rest of your life? Who cares? I would rather have the more interesting questions, the one that actually make you think and talk about it, right? Who's talking about, oh, would you rather never use, like, who's gonna really choose never using a social media again over watching a movie or something like that? And vice, I guess, you know, it's like one, like, for me personally, I don't give a shit. I don't want to lose one of them. It's a hypothetical, I know, but it's like, who fucking cares? Like, yeah, there's a few discords that I'm a part of that have the question of the day bot, and I see that one so often. It comes up multiple times, and I'm just like, God, this irks me. So I don't know why it irks me so much, but it fucking irks me so much. I hate questions like that. Would you rather never watch TV again or never watch YouTube again? Fuck you. Who cares? Give me something interesting. You know, give me an interesting one. All right, we're gonna end it here today, folks. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you all on Saturday, most likely, to play Neo. I know I've been promising that for a while, but things in life pop up, you know, and I might have to, you know, I might actually have to cancel it again. But my dad said he probably won't need help this weekend in Pittsburgh, so I did offer the help though, move some more stuff over, but so that's up in the air right now. I'll let you guys know what gets decided by Saturday, of course. And that's just kind of how it's going to be for a while. There's, you know, it's just, it is what it is, you know. So if you could just join the Discord, and you can keep up with all the latest YemmytheFerret news and schedule changes. All right. Well, it's not my parents that I'm helping. It's my sister, so. Or I would be helping, yeah. Anyway, I'm YemmytheFerret, and I'm out of here. I'll see you guys next time. So long.
Bye, bitch!